Thumping. Thump, thump, thump. It's been 4 nights since the slow and lazy deliberate thump has started. It carries on for what seems like hours. This noise is muffled, but once awoken up by it, it is hard to ignore the muffled sound, as Lan can verify since 27th February. It appeared out of nowhere at 3:13 a.m. every morning since Friday. Lan passed it off as perhaps a new antisocial tenant in his building, like he needed another one. If he wasn't so afraid of the confrontation, he would explore the origins like anyone with disturbed sleep. But every night the noise returned, and every night he placed his elbow over his face and willed it to stop, were it to be the last night his slumber would be interrupted. As the week progressed and the noise continued, the thumping was crawling on Lan's temper. His bravery grew, brought on by lack of sleep. It caused Lan to do something out of his comfort zone. On his return from work on Thursday evening, he went along his floor to his neighbors to see if they were similarly disturbed with his thumping. One neighbor after the next opened the door to Lan and confirmed that they have not heard any noise and made their respective excuses to close the door and finish their conversation with this nervous little man they saw occasionally in the hallway. Again at 3:13 a.m., the thumping has begun again. Thump, thump, thump. Lan wasn't disturbed this time, as he was clearly awake, but his interaction with his neighbors made him feel inadequate. He knew what they thought of him, some weirdo that keeps to himself, who averts his gaze to avoid any passing pleasantries, who doesn't have a social life, who never has visitors. Lan knew what they thought of him, as this is what his colleagues think of him. Thump, thump, thump. They don't know me. Why do they all judge me? Thump, thump, thump. The weekend came and went. The thumping continued, each night continuing for a little bit longer than the previous. Gradually creeping into what should be a new day, Lan was beginning to take action. He had ventured to his apartment door to look out the spy hole on his Monday night when the thumping started, but could see nothing. On Tuesday he ventured into the corridor and paced up and down, but the thumping neither grew louder or quieter as he moved. He assumed that its origins were on another floor. Lan repeated last week's exercise of visiting his neighbors, only this time on the floor above and below his apartment. Again he got the same response, a brief look of confusion followed by an apologetic tone, almost condescending tone from Lan's point of view, an abrupt end to the conversation at the close of the door. He was sure he could hear the sigh of relief when his neighbor from the other side. Again the thumping started at 3:13 a.m. Again Lan was awake, but this night was different. The thumping was louder, much louder. Lan being physically inferior specimen he is, he grabbed the bat he kept beside his front door and entered the corridor. He paced up his floor, up and down. Again the noise was louder than previous night, but it didn't grow any louder or quieter with his movements. He descended to the floor below and paced those corridors until he was sure the thumping was not here. He went to the third floor again, and there was no change to the volume of the thump. Thump, thump, thump. Len reluctantly gave up and returned to his apartment. The thumping continued until he left the building that morning. His lack of sleep was getting to him. The normally mild-mannered and quiet individual was abrupt with his colleagues and made a young intern cry when her fumbling incompetence again agitated him. He watched his colleagues throughout the morning, whispering and stealing glances in his direction. A feeling of almost claustrophobia enveloped him, and he had to get out of the office. Len returned to his apartment building early afternoon. As he entered the lobby, the thumping began once again. Len returned to his apartment building early afternoon. As soon as he entered the lobby, the thumping began. It was incredibly loud. Thump, thump, thump. The pace of the thump seems to have quickened. Len ran up the stairs, feeling his leg burn, and into the safety of his apartment, but there was no escape from the thumping. Len grabbed his bat again and went into the corridor. He went from floor to floor in a desperate attempt to find the source of this noise that he felt was twisting his mind. Again, he could not find the source. The thumping continued all day and all night, louder and louder. He didn't even think about going to work on Friday as he sat cross-legged in his living room, the time approaching 7 a.m., the bat resting across his knees. A thought raced to the front of his mind, and in an instant he was in the kitchen holding a kitchen knife. Slowly at first, he eased the pointed tip into his ears, until pain numbed the sound. He repeated on the other side, but as soon as the pain subsided, the thumping returned. Louder it grew. Thump, 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 thump. He ran up screaming into the corridor, still in his clothes from yesterday, blood dripping from either side of his head onto what was his formerly immaculate white shirt. A neighbor came out to be greeted by this shocking sight and attempted to calm Len down, but as soon as a hand of comfort was placed on his shoulder, Len lashed out wildly with the knife he still held in his hand. One swing was all that was needed as Len caught the poor lady from 2C across the throat. More neighbors raced to the scene. Len swung wildly, doing enough to cause his neighbors to retreat, but Len could still see them judging him with labels like weirdo and maniac. It was them that was doing this to him. Len pursued his neighbors, slashing wildly as they attempted in vain to defend themselves. Eventually, the noise of people died down and replaced by that familiar thump, thump, thump. Len, now unblinking, walked towards the lift, and on his arrival, the doors have opened. Mrs. Peterson from 1B had come up. She was instantly greeted by the sight of Len in his now red shirt, knife in hand. In the background, she could make out the distorted lamps of some of her former neighbors, and another lying particularly in a doorway. Before she could lift a finger in protest, Len brought the knife up into her stomach, and then on her back when she doubled over. He entered the lift, staring blankly forward until something grabbed his attention. In the lift mirror, he could see a large pulsating vein on the side of his forehead, which danced a particular rhythm. He recognized the thumping.